Now, in South Sudan, there's a university called the Dr. John Garang Memorial University, named after the Southern independence leader. And this is a poorly funded university. I mean, lots of people say that, oh, my university has cutbacks and, it's too expensive to go to school. Let's put this into perspective. Dr. John Garang Memorial University has no dormitory, so the students are sleeping in tents. Dr. John Garang Memorial University, its library, has no books. So a library is supposed to be a research institution, not just for students, but for professors. So a university with no books, and this is a new country where the people are terribly poor, even though there's enormous oil wealth.
Yeah.
For them to build a future, they have to have a highly educated class of young people. So a Sudanese professor in Europe launched an international book drive to get people to donate their used university textbooks, any language or university level, and then they'd have to figure out some way to cover the cost of shipping.
Okay.
So locally, I'm a journalist, so I ran an article in one of our arts weeklies on my radio show, and also I designed a poster for the book drive, and I donated about 300 of my own books from my collection. And so on June 15th, if my book, The Alchemists of Kush, reaches the Kindle Top 100, I will donate $500 from my book sales in order to cover the costs of shipping the books from Edmonton to South Sudan. And to put that into perspective, it's going to cost at least $10,000 to ship a container of these books. So, if anybody who buys a book, and you don't have to have a Kindle or an electronic reader, you just have to have a computer. There's a free Kindle app for PC. If you've got an iPad, there's all kinds of devices that can read it. And if you don't like reading on the computer, you can send it as a gift to anybody else. You just have to have their email address. At $3, how can you go wrong? And there in fact will be a paperback version of the book available the same day. So if you want to buy it and read it yourself in paperback, you can get it. But I certainly encourage people to buy it on June 15th itself.
Going back to the whole concept of Imhotep, you mentioned that people needed to be able to see the past, present, and the future simultaneously. Do you have any ideas on how the community would be able to achieve this kind of thing in the next 20 or so years, 20, 25 years?
You mean achieve the kind of, when you say this kind of thing, you mean this kind of triple vision?
Yes.
Well, that's a fascinating question, and an insightful one. One that actually you're the first person who's ever asked me that question, which I really appreciate. I believe that one of the keys to this is, in fact, literature. That science fiction is a medium that constantly calls upon people to imagine the future. Imhotep specifically wants us to look at the past, the present, and the future. So instead of just double vision, this is triple vision. One thing that I think some of our folks might be surprised to know is that science fiction has I think a disproportionate appeal to us. So some of us who are too concerned with being daddy cool and all that other kind of stuff might think, science fiction, that's not for me. No, with their fake accents that they put on from the hip-hop records they listen to. But it's not true. As a matter of fact, and here's how I know that. Years ago, I used to take part in an online discussion group, I'm an African-Canadian, a Kenyan-Canadian, but this was with African-Americans. And I asked people about their science fiction tastes, and I was shocked at just like almost everybody on the group talked about how much they love science fiction. So I spent years interviewing a lot of people, and it's amazing how many of us have been fascinated by just small things, our appearances as characters in books, our appearance on the original Star Trek as Lieutenant Uhura, or as the Lieutenant Commander Geordi Forge on the new Star Trek, and all these other places. And in fact, we yearn for these things, we thirst for them, because it's so exciting for us to see images of us existing in the future when so many of the news stories that we get misleadingly tell us that we're doomed. And in fact, in the white world of communications, the word Africa is shorthand for doomsday. So they'll say, I just listened to CBC the other day and somebody was talking about girls who were having a chance to use their web service. And the way that this young woman was talking about it, she said she was trying to make a contrast between, it's not just kids who are wealthy and affluent. There are girls in Africa. Like girls somewhere scattered among 54 countries and about 1 billion people, because that's as specific as she could get. So the point is, we're not doomed. On the contrary, we're stunning innovators who are doing remarkable things all over the world. Getting back to how can I prove that we have a disproportionate interest in science fiction, in the U.S., this is stats from a few years ago, but 1 out of every 4 movie tickets was bought by a person of African descent, even though Africans are only about 10% of the population. We buy more than our share of movie tickets, and it's like 8 or out of 10 of the biggest money-making movies of all time were what Will Smith calls critter flicks. In other words, they're science fiction or fantasy movies, okay? So I admit this is indirect evidence, but these things together suggest to me, and based on the conversations and interviews that I've done, that a lot of us love a literature and movies that don't put us doomed in the present or in chains in the 19th century. We love stuff that lets us imagine an escape from this stuff, and escape that ideally that we ourselves make into building a better world. So I think the more of us who read Imhotep and science fiction and Afrofuturism, the more of us will be, from a young age, be saying, you know, I want to build that next thing. I want to invent that next thing. I want to make this discovery. I want to build an institution that is going to put millions of us to work or whatever. That's the kind of stuff that I think Imhotep does. And that's what reading science fiction, which traditionally didn't have many of us in it, it still did it for me.
Impressive. I can't help but agree. That's some great magic.
And you know, we do that even with our music. I mean, I know that you have done some radio documentary work on this topic of Afrofuturism in music, and a lot of us, whether it's, you know, a jazz artist like Sun Ra, or it's Parliament Funkadelic with the UFO Mothership, it's certain imagery that you get in certain Public Enemy videos. It's the artist Janelle Monáe and the Arch Android.
Recent artists like Kid Cudi, concept albums about being on the moon and being alone and whatnot.
Absolutely, yeah. There's the sister who did a cappella. I'm blanking on her name, but Khalees. And this is, you know, we got this stretching back decades ago to Sun Ra, and we've got more of it now. So, you know, we have, a lot of us love this stuff, and you know, it's highly regarded. And I think what would really be good to see is us making a push to be getting these books instead of just what you have now across the United States, which is the so-called street lit. Some of your listeners might not know about this, but it's a lot of books. Basically, it's like NWA albums turned into books. And I'm not saying those books shouldn't exist, but I am saying that constantly promoting these books to the exclusion of all of our other stories means that we're limiting our imaginations to crime, drugs, prostitution, and misery. And instead, forgetting that just twinkling beyond the projects are the pyramids and rocket ships to the stars.
To me, literature is about escapism and not being trapped in something that is real. So I highly applaud you on that. I highly applaud you on taking us forward on that. One last question, really. With all this experience you have amassed now, what do you think you would say to your younger writer self had you the chance?
Wow, that's great. Well, I would say that it's critical, and I would say this to every young writer, and I wish I could have said this to myself. Understand, nobody will care about your career as much as you do. So, don't think that you can hand off responsibility to anybody that you sign a contract with or that you don't sign a contract with. Know the business. Know the business well enough that even if you weren't writing, you could handle somebody else's business. Without that, your career will flatline. And the other thing would be learn to recognize opportunities and build towards them. And that's what I was able to do because of the advice of my wife, the advice of Ishmael Reed, a terrific author, one of our great authors from the United States, local authors Kelly Combe and Cheryl K. Tardif, who encouraged me, go indie. Break out of that corporate system and go indie. Their advice made me look at this seriously, and it's changed my life.
The answer is go independent. Just abandon the system. Get off the sinking ship.
Definitely. And the thing is, like, in 2004 when my first book came out, or in 2001 when I submitted that novel manuscript to my to the agent who would become my agent, going independent just wasn't a realistic proposition for most people. But new distribution technology through the internet has made that possible. So it wouldn't have been, back then, 10 years ago, go indie, but it would have been understand that, somebody who you sign a contract with, they have their own interests, and they got to take care of business for what's best for them. That's logical. That doesn't make them bad. That means that they aren't me. And it's easy to be naive and to think, oh no, this person's going to do everything for me. Well, how can they? They've got 20, 30 customers, clients, whatever, executives they have to attend to as well. So I would say, learn to take care of business yourself.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Brother Jabril, thank you kindly for your insightful questions.
My name is Jabril Yassin, and I am here finishing my conversation with the excellent Minister Faust about his book, The Alchemists of Kush, which is coming out June 15th. Online
at Amazon.com. Search for Minister Faust. Minister's just like it sounds. Faust, F-A-U-S-T. You can also find me at ministerfaust.com.
Right. Thank you very much.